The Chicago Bears will be on the clock at this moment right now in 2 days. It's Bears in the Stands. We're going over live mock drafts. We're going over a bunch of different scenarios here right now. Welcome into Bears in the Stands. Happy to have you here for another edition, talking some ball with my guys here as we get things in order. I am your host, Greg Braggs Jr. Alongside me is Christian and Joey. You can follow those guys at CJFB Scout for Christian and at Joey Sandwich _ on Twitter. So make sure you're doing that as you are following along. This is Bears in the Stands, and we are going to be having some fun here, talking some ball, talking some football, obviously the NFL draft here in just a couple days. So trying some different things out for you guys here tonight. Obviously, a lot of people excited about the NFL draft, but a lot of different questions going around for the Chicago Bears. So before we get into some of this stuff, let's just go around the horn so people understand who they're talking to and what we're doing here. So Joey, I'll start with you. Doesn't have to be crazy or anything like that, but just figure we'll say a little hello to the audience here while we're starting things off.
How's it going, everyone? Yeah, it's been a long 2-3 months, depending on how invested you've been in the Senior Bowl, Combine, 30 visits, all that stuff. So we're finally here, a couple of days away, millions of mock drafts. So I'm finally excited to kind of see what's going to unfold here in just a few days, and kind of do a final touch up on what we think might happen here.
Yeah, absolutely, Joey. And we appreciate you jumping on here. Like I said, we're starting things off just the day before the draft. Going to try some different things out this summer, and including in that is our guy Christian, who, you know, for those of you that don't know, the three of us are always in the spaces on Twitter. Yes, the infamous spaces where we're trading ball knowledge and at times talking a lot of crap, but having some fun at the same time. But we figured we'd put a face to the names. And Christian here, obviously, if you've been in our spaces, you've heard him. Really, he's kind of an encyclopedia when it comes to a lot of these guys coming out in the draft, and obviously your Chicago Bears as well. So Christian, you know, a little introduction for the class here.
Yo, what's going on, guys? Glad to be here. Name's Christian. I player personnel assistant at the college football level. Putting together over 125 player evaluation reports so far in this class. Putting together some team-specific boards. My first top 50 is out right now on my Twitter account, and my top 50 second edition, it'll be out tomorrow.
Yeah, and how long did that take you, you know, going through 50, you know, your top 50? I know you're kind of following this throughout the season. And A, how long did it take you? And B, what are some of the surprises and things you learned along the way?
Yeah, I would say I started about early November. Around late October, I put together a list of guys that I wanted to watch. Obviously, you don't know exactly who the early declares are going to be in the class, but put together a list of guys that I wanted to watch. Started off in November with the guys who were pretty much guaranteed of being a part of this class. And then, yeah, it's been from November up until pretty much now, finishing up some day 3 guys and their scouting reports at the moment right now. I would say biggest surprise, probably the depth of this running back class and the depth of this defensive tackle class. They've been pretty hyped up, but I would believe the hype. If I didn't really know a lot about it, it's as advertised.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, all the way, obviously we're going to start things off here with Ashton Jeanty, but it goes all the way to a guy that I've started to fall in love with Taj Brooks, you know, and out of Texas Tech. And so it's a wide spectrum of different types of running backs. And I think it's going to be interesting because I think obviously Ashton Jeanty is the guy everybody's looking at and is the belle of the ball. But I would bet that there's going to be somebody in this draft that lives up to the same kind of potential that Ashton Jeanty is. It's just a matter of who that player is and where he ends up, because it's not just about ability, it's about talent, and it's also about where you fall and who you go to and the coaching staff you work under. So it's some of the things you gotta keep in mind. So with that being said, let's get right into it. And like I said, we're gonna go over a few different scenarios, talk about running backs, offensive line, defensive line. Everything's on the table for the Chicago Bears. And then maybe here when we finish the show, we'll do some live mock drafts with you guys here, and you can give your input on what we should do. So make sure you're hitting that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We already got some super chats in here. Jonathan Otten dropping a $10 super chat. Brick juice all day, Jo. Super excited for this show and happy to be here now. Let's go get this left tackle. So clearly Jo is still trench drunk. And then Kimura Daddy saying $4.99. So we appreciate your super chat as well. So yeah, like I said, Ashton Jeanty is the hot topic right now for everybody. And I'll just say this, as much as I've tried to stay disciplined to the trench drunk moniker that I've been calling it all season here, all off season, I should say, I got to say, as we're getting closer to the clock starting up, it's hard not to be enticed by this. It's hard not to be willing to trade up. It's hard not to think about the idea that, yes, an offensive lineman is going to help protect your quarterback, who's your biggest investment here for the future and your most important asset here going forward. But so would a running back. A running back is going to protect Caleb Williams just as much as a left tackle will in some sense, especially in a first-year offense with Ben Johnson. And so I'm just curious from your guys' perspective, and Christian, I'll start with you. What are some of the realistic scenarios you're hearing here? Because it's all over the map, from trading up to 3, trading up to 5, Ashton Jeanty potentially falling to 10, and the Bears being on the clock in their spot. It's kind of hard to put a gauge on exactly how this draft is going to lay out.
Yeah, I would say I don't know exactly what a trade up would look like or how likely that is. But I definitely do think there is a chance that Ashton Jeanty does get to that 7, 8, 9 range. And then you kind of have to ask yourself how likely it is that any of those teams picking there, whether it's the Jets at 7, whether it's the Panthers at 8, the Saints at 9, how likely they are to take a running back, regardless of how great the prospect is. So I think his floor is really 5-ish. I think there is a chance he goes 5 to Jacksonville, but then, or I guess I would say his ceiling is 5. And then I think his floor would probably be the Bears at 10. So anywhere in that 5 to 10 range. But then, like I said, that 7 and 9, you're probably not looking at those teams drafting a running back. So if someone's jumping you, then that's one thing. But I think if he makes it past 6, there's a good chance he's there at 10.
Yeah. And Joey, you hear this and there's the potential of the Bears potentially trading up to 5 here and jumping, the Raiders and the Jacksonville Jaguars sitting there. Maybe they would be encouraged to trade back to 10. I don't know. Are you feeling any of this smoke, or are you thinking this is more leveraging, when it comes to different reports being put out there, trying to put the pressure on? It even seemed like Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham today were pulling I don't know if you guys watch, Storage Wars with Dave Hester, when he drops a locker on someone and he's bidding the guy up. It almost feels like that's what they were doing today. We're like, both of them like, it's going to be a wild Thursday. And so they're almost trying to entice their competition to trade up because they know they have no interest in it.
I think the interesting thing is, so for myself, I think, like Christian said, 5 is kind of that ceiling. I'm not too worried about the Patriots, and I know there's all sorts of smoke right now, like you mentioned. You have people mentioning, could the Giants take him, right? Could they be trying to make up for watching Saquon go to the Eagles and try to reel their fans back in? I think that's so far off the table. Same thing, you've also had some a little bit of smoke talking about, well, Mike Vrabel absolutely loved Derrick Henry in the run game in Tennessee, right? Could they be? I don't really think that. I think the conversation in terms of a trade up really does start at 5. And even there, I'm still a little skeptical. It seems like ETN is a kind of a guy that's being phased out a bit, but I'm not too sure if Jeanty is really on their radar. You look at Liam Cohen, right? He's, if I'm not mistaken, he was with the Rams right before the Bucks. Yep. And look at the type of running backs that they've had over there. Kyron Williams, undrafted workhorse running back. Rashad White in Tampa, along with Bucky Irving, second and fourth round. So I'm not too sure anything can happen at this point, but I do think if we want to talk about the trade up scenario, 5 is probably where that begins.
Or 6, right? I mean, Christian, I don't know if the Raiders are they in a position yet as a franchise to be drafting a running back? I mean, wouldn't it make sense for the Raiders to trade back to 10, gain some more of this draft equity, and keep stacking the deck? Because I don't know if their roster, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if their roster is ready for a win now move like drafting Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think taking a running back in the top 10, I think that's a luxury pick. I think that's something that you do when your roster is really in that position where you're ready to win games. And I think bringing in Pete Carroll and kind of changing things over, I don't think this team is ready to compete, especially that difficult AFC West division. I think they need to add a lot of players on defense. I think they also definitely need to add players on the offensive line. They took Jackson Powers-Johnson last year in the second round. They've got Colton Miller at left tackle, but they lost Andre James, who's an interior offensive lineman for them. They could also add a right tackle, and then they could add players in the secondary. They could add another defensive tackle. So there's a lot of pieces that need to be in place there, in my opinion, before they go the running back route.
And just to jump in on that really quick too, Christian, I know everyone likes to talk about Pete Carroll and the run game and his love for running backs, right? But I took a little time to look up Pete Carroll's first ever draft choice with the Seahawks, right? 2010, 6 overall pick, same as now. They went with Russell Okung. And the following season, 2011, they drafted another tackle. Top 20 was the first time when they were, or that season. But his first 2 years there, first thing they did was invest in the offensive line. So as much as that narrative, likes to get pushed about Pete Carroll and his backs, I'm not too sure they're going to go that route.
I 100% agree. I also think when you talk about their offensive coordinator that they brought in, Chip Kelly, having spent the last year at Ohio State, we know these Ohio State running backs. Quinshon Judkins, my number 3 running back in the class. Travion Henderson, my number 4 running back in this class, will probably be guys that will be available early in the second round. 2 guys that have familiarity with the OC in Vegas. So I could see them going that route and kind of punting on running back in the first round and then addressing that in the second round.
All right. So, you're talking about the Raiders. We talk about the trade up potential scenarios. But let's just talk flat out about Ashton Jeanty to the Bears, because like I said, I guess I'm the most undisciplined fan of all time, because this year and the last year as well, I said I was not going to go into the season completely lost in the offseason Kool-Aid, pick the Bears to win 12 games and completely lose my mind, yell at anyone that thinks otherwise. And last year, obviously, halfway through a Hard Knocks, that went to bed. That went right out the window. And this year, I'm staying true to the no hype so far being the operative word there. And we'll see if I actually make it through training camp. But the other aspect is I said I was going to stick to the trenches. I promised Corey Wooten I would stick to the trenches. And now we are 2 days away. And all this Ashton Jeanty smoke, I've woke up the last 2 days thinking about Ashton Jeanty as a Chicago Bear. And I got to be honest, just for me as a fan, it does excite me. It is something that I'm actually at the point now of wanting to happen, however it does. And maybe this is exactly where Ryan Poles gets, like where he was last year with Rome Odunze, where you start visualizing a certain player on your roster, and then you get a potential itchy trigger finger to move up. And whether he falls to 10, which I certainly think is a possibility, or the Bears trade up to 5, I also believe in this smoke. And to be honest with you, for me, and we'll go around the horn, either way, I I want Ashton Jeanty on the Chicago Bears. I just think that that's going to make this offense dynamic. You know what you're getting from the rest of the skill position players with Roma Dunze, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet. Caleb Williams obviously still has a lot of development to do, but you know the kind of run game that Ben Johnson is going to implement. And now you have an offensive line. Your interior offensive line is strong. Darnell Wright is solid. You still have 2 second-round picks to address your left tackle position. So it's not like people act like, oh, you know, once the first round is over, now who are you going to get? Well, they have some options and some opportunity to continue to bolster that offensive line in the second round. So it's hard for me to now go away from a guy that arguably could be the best player in the draft. And I said it the other day, a couple days ago, to me, he's probably the safest pick in this draft. Maybe Travis Hunter as well. But I think the one moniker with him is, hey, what position is he going to play? So I don't know where you guys stand, but I think I'm Team Jeanty now, even though I spent the last 4 months saying otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong taking Ashton Jeanty. That's my number 4 player overall in the class. He's extremely elusive. He's got great contact balance. He can run with power. He's got that great low center of gravity. He's built low to the ground. He catches the football. He's high effort in pass protection where he does need to make some strides there, but he's shown the effort there and the willingness, and he's adequate in that area as well. I think, especially in Ben Johnson's scheme that's so multiple, you see him run a lot of zone stuff. You see him run a lot of gap stuff over his time in Detroit. So I think getting a guy who is scheme versatile, who can stay on the field for all 3 downs, and will be one of the 5 or 6 best running backs in the league from day one. I don't think you can go wrong with that pick at number 10.
So, Joey, where do you stand on it? Team Jeanty or Team Trenches?
I don't want to give you a cop-out answer here, but I mean, I would be absolutely lying to you if I said I didn't want Ashton Jeanty. I mean, I think, in my personal opinion, I would rather go a different route. It has nothing to do with I don't believe that he can be one of the best running backs in the league. Nothing to do that I don't think he'll help elevate the offense and Caleb Williams. None of that at all. I think I just have a bit of a different perspective when it comes to the value of a first round pick, and then especially a top 10 pick. We've seen what's happened to this team in recent history when you don't hit on those picks. And when I say hit, I refer to guys that are here for the long run, guys that are here for 7, 8, 9 years, getting second contracts. And again, I don't think that Ashton Jeanty wouldn't get a second contract because he doesn't deserve it. It just more often than not goes that way with first round running backs. And so I know there's the mindset of, hey, if I get 3, 4 good years out of him, I'm fine with that. Fine. I understand that thought process. I'm not in that camp. But look, if it happens, I'll be sitting there screaming as he runs 80 yards down the field on a screenplay or whatever, on a toss. There's not going to be any hate from my end if Ashton Jeanty. I mean, how could you not be excited about him? That's kind of how I look at it. Not to throw cold water on it.
Yeah, and I definitely think you do have to weigh the trade-off of what do the offensive tackles look like in round 2 that you would be taking if you took a running back in the first? What do the running backs look like on day 2, whether that's 39, whether that's 41, whether that's 72? What's the trade-off of taking one versus the other? Or if you're talking about an edge rusher or a defensive tackle, wherever it is, I think you kind of have to weigh those things as well. And I like that you mentioned the second contract thing. We all know the shelf life of running backs. You look at some of these running backs that have been taken in the top 10 or in the top 15 in the draft, your Todd Gurley's, your Ezekiel Elliott's, your Leonard Fournette's, guys like that. Their shelf life has not been the highest of those guys that have been picked in the top 15 at the running back position. So while I do agree, Braggs, that it is a safe pick in the short term, it actually is not the safest pick in the long term as far as getting a long runway with this guy and getting maybe a second contract out of him.
Yeah, and I get looking ahead, and we'll move on here after this, but I get looking ahead, but 5 years from now isn't my concern. My concern is these next 2 years because these are the most pivotal years of Caleb Williams' development. If you hit this offseason and you actually execute where you've got the offensive lineman, you've got the head coach, you've got everything correctly in place, and it's a complete opposite of what we went through last year in a 10-game losing streak and an environment that was not successful to try to develop a quarterback. These next 2 years, especially this year, and you've got to give some allowance because it's a first-year offense, first-year play caller with a quarterback trying to develop that chemistry with the head coach. So that's why I say 2 years. And so that's why I think Ryan Poles might have that itchy trigger finger. He didn't go for it last year with Roma Dunze. He stayed patient, let the board fall to him. But I think he might be a little more impatient this time around because he's trying to do everything he can to surround Caleb Williams with whatever he can so he can be comfortable, whether that's a good pocket, a good play caller, or a good run game. And that way they can develop him at a much slower pace than they tried to last year, especially to start the year. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out. But this Ashton Jeanty story ain't going away for the next 2 days. And I'll tell you this much. If you're coming to our draft party on Thursday night, and I know Robert is, and Gary's in our chat as well, he'll be there, and a bunch of other people, CHGO diehards. If they take Ashton Jeanty at 10, that place is going to go absolutely insane. I can promise you that.
Greg,
so
one more quick point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to, like I said, I can see your side of that, and I will agree to some point with, what is there, 58 Super Bowls that have been played? I'm going to butcher the stat a little bit, but something out of those 58 Super Bowls, I think it's roughly 20-ish of them are owned by like the same 6-ish, 7 teams. The reality is that it's an extremely hard thing to do to win a Super Bowl. We, as Bears fans, know some of us haven't even seen one, right? And so I guess if ultimately they think that during those 4 years, even if that's how long his shelf life is on this team, he doesn't get a second contract. If they ultimately end up winning a ring, you'll take it, right? So it kind of is what it is. That's the end goal. If that's what is the result from picking Ashton Jeanty, then so be it.
Yep, absolutely. King Mac here in the chat saying, my boy CJ football knower. That's right.
Shout out to Mac.
Yeah, shout out to Max. Shout out to Robert, Astro, Irv, all these guys here in the chat. Hassan, Nikki. Appreciate all you guys here hanging out. Gary, Jer, my guy. Make sure you hit the like button while you're hanging out here. And come out to the draft party. Like I said, at 115 Bourbon Street here coming up on Thursday night. We'll also be there. Friday night, you can meet Lance Briggs and Corey Wooten if you come out. As we get into some trenches talk, as we move things around and as we get into the live mock drafts, we'll start kind of delving into scenarios that kind of become the trickle-down effect of these things as we, look at the second and third rounds where the Bears have 3 picks. But moving over to the offensive line, obviously there's 3 top options that everyone keeps talking about going in the top 10 between Kelvin Banks, Will Campbell, and of course Armand Membu out of Missouri. And Christian, I'll start with you. What is going on when it comes to this vast difference of opinion, this wide spectrum on Kelvin Banks? You got one side of the aisle that says he's the number 1 tackle. Kyle Long is saying he's the number 1 tackle. Then you have Dane Brugler, who everyone respects. He does such a great job with his beast guide that everyone, buys every year this time of year for draft season, saying he's a guard. So I want you to kind of give, when you talk about, hey, I'm scouting these guys throughout the year, give us the scouting report in your eyes and in your mind when you look at Kelvin Banks.
Yeah, Kelvin Banks there are some elite athletes at the tackle position in this class. If you consider Will Campbell to be a tackle, Armand Membu, Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon, and Kelvin Banks is probably a step below all of those guys in athleticism, but that shouldn't take away from the fact that he's a very good athlete. He's got extremely light feet. He's got a great build and a great frame, And then on top of that, he's got good initial quickness off the ball. He's strong. He's got powerful hands. He does have some independent hand usage, which is not always a guarantee with these offensive line prospects in the draft. A lot of them, you see a lot of two-hand striking and stuff like that. I think the thing that I like the most about Kelvin Banks is he's just got a mean streak in the run game. He climbs to the second level well. He connects well with those second level targets. He can operate those alley screens and those combo blocks and things like that. And then I also think he provides a scheme versatility that maybe a Josh Connerly doesn't, maybe that a Josh Simmons doesn't, in that he can be that kind of insert guy or that puller and operate those base blocks in a gap scheme, but he can also get those he can also overtake defenders in a wide zone scheme and operate those backside cutoffs.
What do you think where people say there's a difference between strength and power, and how this guy can get overpowered at times against some of the more elite athletes? And when you talk about getting to the NFL level, those are more times than not the guys he's going to be going up against.
Yeah, a lot of time power is just going to be your initial strike, your initial punch, just upon that initial contact. And then a lot of times strength is going to be more of a sustainable thing throughout the rep.
Yeah, endurance, for sure. Yeah, I don't know, Joey. I mean, it feels like at this point, if the Bears stick and pick at 10, it definitely feels like Kelvin Banks will be like, to me, there's 4 names to look at if you're a Bears fan: Will Campbell, Ashton Jeanty, Mason Graham, and Kelvin Banks. And I think of those 4 guys, the highest probability, like if I had to rank them, it probably goes Will Campbell, Ashton Jeanty, Mason Graham, Kelvin Banks on their big board. That would be mine personally. But I also think of highest probability of who will actually be there at 10, it's Kelvin Banks. So if they are to draft Kelvin Banks, are you booing the pick? Are you worried he becomes a guard? Or like, where do you stand on that? Because I know a lot of Bears fans are like, it's become kind of the mini civil war of Kelvin Banks at this point.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it, to say the least. That's kind of how it's unfolded. But look, kind of like Christian mentioned, he's, in terms of his athletic traits, he's not one of those top few guys, and I understand that. I'm not using this player as a one-to-one comp, more so of type of a career arc, right? So take a look at how Taylor Decker has kind of unfolded for the Lions over his career, right?
Yep.
He's got 1 Pro Bowl to his name, no other accolades, but he's a 10-year starter. He's solid week in, week out. So to me, if that's what you get in Kelvin Banks, you get a guy that's going to come in, play 17 games for you every season, be reliable. That's such a hard position to be able to make sure that you nail and that you don't want to have to worry about, right? So if the Bears feel good about that, and that ultimately is the selection, that's why I feel the way that I do. I'm not going to freak out about it. I understand, again, we're past the Jeanty talk for right now. We're operating off of the assumption he's not on the board, so we're going with one of these linemen right now. So if this is what happens, then that's my stance on it. That's how I see it.
Yeah, for me, like Kelvin Banks, he's a top 20 player for me. I think he does, like I said, provide that scheme versatility. We know Ben Johnson, over his time in Detroit, he's loved to run duo, and he's loved to run counter, and he's loved to run pin pull, and he's loved to run a lot of these gap concepts. And then also last year, you saw a little bit more of a shift where they did run wide zone more than they had in the past, but you did still see that balance between gap and zone concepts. So while I think there's a lot of zone specific offensive tackles in this class, I do point to Banks as that guy who, in my opinion, can be that scheme versatile guy where you can run all the concepts that you want and he can be successful. My last thing that I'll say on Banks specifically is I know a lot of people will pick out certain prospects and kind of point to their weaknesses or point to the negatives. All of these offensive linemen in this class do have weaknesses that they come with. And some of them are more physical limitations like play strength, like foot quickness, things like that, like flexibility, like core strength. To me, Kelvin Banks' limitations are all technical things. Like he does get excessive forward lean that causes him to get off balance at times. He can be more diverse in his hand usage and things like that. So I do like Kelvin Banks just for the fact that a lot of his limitations, they're not physical. They're things that need to be cleaned up by an offensive line coach and by a coaching staff. And I think if you trust his coaching staff in Chicago, then you might feel pretty good about taking Kelvin Banks.
And that's where I think fans are going to go, right? I mean, it's fan rationalization, so I'm not gonna bang against the wall, fans that are going to change their tune if the Bears do send in the ticket and it's Kelvin Banks. But you're 100% right. You have to trust Ben Johnson. You have to trust Dan Rorschach. I mean, look at some of the guys that he's developed in New Orleans. And I think that's been some of the biggest problem here in Chicago. Who has necessarily developed? Like they've had guys that are solid. Braxton Jones was a good diamond in the rough type. Maybe diamond in the rough is a little strong, but a 5th round pick that's become serviceable. And Darnell Wright has been solid, but who is like truly ascending? Like who's getting better every year? I think Darnell Wright probably is, but on a very small scale. Now, to be fair to Darnell, his supporting cast around him makes that a lot more difficult. And so the idea here in theory is you've got that interior of the offensive line short up. Guys should start looking a lot better, not just the quarterback, but some of these guys that are actually standing on the trenches here every down. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. How about Armand Membu? Because I think he is the other guy. He's not in my top 4 of my big board of players that I want the Bears to draft. But I do think when you talk about highest probability, because as much as I'd love to talk about Will Campbell, and I have all off season, doesn't seem likely he's falling to 10 anymore. You're going to have to trade up for him, just like you might have to trade up for Ashton Jeanty. But Armand Membu, there is a very good chance that he is also there at 10. So Christian, looking at him, obviously there's a lot of people that are staying far away from Armand because they say he's raw, but yet the Jets have been attached to him at 7. So why is one, what's the discrepancy there where some people view him as a top 7 or even a top 5 pick? And then there's Bears fans saying, run for the hills and hide from this guy.
Yeah, I think I would actually push back on the idea that Armand Membu is a raw player. I think he's actually one of the more technically refined players in this class. I think my biggest concern with Armand Membu is consistency. I think when you watch a full game of him, rep in and rep out, you're not seeing it every single time. And I think a coaching staff is going to have to get that out of him. But if you were to grade him just based on the flashes and what he's shown his capability of doing and what's kind of in his toolbox, he's a very technically refined player. He has independent hand usage and he has used different pass sets and things like that. So I do think that he's a guy that can be brought along pretty quickly by a good coaching staff. I think obviously the big question, if we're talking specifically about the Chicago Bears, can he play on the left side? Obviously, he's athletic enough to do so, but until you see him do it, you don't really know whether he can make that transition.
When I last night I was on with Draft Dr. Phil and Shane Marsaw from the Tape Never Lies Network, and those guys, they're vehemently against the idea of Armand Membu at 10 for the Bears. And one of the reasons that Phil cites, and obviously Phil has his way of breaking down the tape and his sense from, his coaching background, but he says he gets the sense by watching the tape that he doesn't feel like Armand necessarily loves the game. So I don't like, for me, the way I watch, I'm watching highlights. You can pull up a highlight reel guy. I'll watch a little bit of tape, but how can one see that through what they're watching? What would you say is the reason he might be seeing that on the tape?
Yeah, for an offensive line, a lot of the time it's just playing through the whistle. A lot of the time it's if especially for interior offensive linemen, but if you don't have anyone lined up directly across from you and kind of the way that the rush plays out is that no one ends up coming to you, whether you're a guard, whether you're a center, and you're sitting there actively looking for extra work, things like that. But I think playing through the whistle, I think that's something that Armand Membu does actually do to the same level as a guy like a Kelvin Banks or a guy like a Will Campbell. I mean, those guys are your typical line term junkyard dogs. Like that's kind of what you see when you turn on the tape and watch those three guys.
Yeah.
I'll give you my meatball take about it here, Braggs. Did you see how this guy ran his 40-yard dash at the combine? Screaming his lungs off. Absolutely screaming as he ran 40 yards and put up a great time. I mean, look, I know that's not playing the game of football, but I mean, if that guy wasn't psyched to be at the combine and move along in this process, I mean, I don't know, but I don't really have anything else to add. I can't say I've seen a reason why he doesn't love the game.
All right. Well, let's move things along here as we're rolling through. We'll move over to the defensive line. You got Michael Williams, and you got obviously Mason Graham, everybody Bears fans' favorites, and then Mike Green, who is an interesting one because I think if it weren't for some of the things that came out during the combine, I think Mike Green might be one of the favorite picks for most Bears fans. And so, let's say the Bears, all their offensive options are exhausted through the top 9, and now you're looking at defensive players you can't trade back. Christian, where are you going with this pick if you're looking defensively? Because, Shamar Stewart, who I left off the graphic for good reason, I think a lot of Bears fans, including myself, don't love the idea of a guy that, doesn't have high production, but has all the traits. Traits is a word that I think scares Bears fans because we've kind of been through this before with different draft picks where they try to sell us on traits. Shane McClellan probably comes to mind. I can't really speak to how much production he had. I believe he come out of Boise State, right? And so I don't know, when you look at, this defensive class, last year, the first defensive player off the board was what, 15? I mean, obviously, I think Abdul Carter's going quick here this year. It's not going to be the same way, but
yeah,
I mean, defense, it's those guys are going to fall, some of the top line talent. So I'm not really sure where you guys stand with this when it comes to some of the defensive line guys.
Yeah, I think Mike Green would have been a great option. Obviously, he's got his question marks that are not football related. So if you're looking Mike Green aside, I think that guy for me, if Mason Graham is not on the board, the guy that I point to is Michael Williams. Shamar Stewart, personally for me, not a top 20 player for me in this class. I've got him as my 22nd ranked player. But I think Michael Williams is a guy who you turn on the tape, you watch him at Georgia. He's an elite run defender. He's extremely powerful, 6'5", 265 pounds, 34-inch arms, things that work in a Dennis Allen type of defense. He's an edge setter. Like I said, elite run defender, guy with heavy hands, great play strength. And the lateral twitch, the explosiveness for him, the initial explosiveness. Is he the fastest straight line guy for 20, 30 yards? No, but he's quick off the ball. He's got the lateral agility, and that shows up in his pursuit range as well. And then from a scheme standpoint at Georgia, you have to think about the fact that he was playing that 3-4 defensive end rather than that 3-4 outside linebacker edge rusher. So he wasn't given the most opportunity to rush the passer like a guy who maybe a James Pierce in this class, maybe a Mike Green, guys who get that wide alignment and just get to tee off on the quarterback on every down. But I think if you put him in a true edge role in a scheme where he's not running a lot of stunts last year and in his whole career at Georgia, they run a lot of stunts where they have a second level linebacker come and loop around the edge and he has to take more of an inside, more disciplined rush lane. I think you let him just pin his ears back and rush the passer and you kind of take his development week by week and year by year. I think he can turn into a really good player.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not to, stick with Michael Williams because, I'm sure you could talk about a couple other guys here, but honestly, he's my favorite defensive lineman as well. Talking about a guy that had 30% of his tackles last year were for TFLs, which is awesome. You've already talked about how he's a great run defender. That kind of speaks to that. Like you said, he's got a quality get off. The other thing is he's only 20 years old. That's awesome. He's got probably could fill out his frame a little bit, but as you mentioned, 6'5", 260-ish. I mean, I think some people are a little scared sometimes of prospects that don't have like a deep pass rush bag. He's got a good bull rush already. He does need to work on his counters a little bit, but as you just mentioned, Braggs, the defensive player that was taken first last year was Verse, right? And
Yep.
Verse,
Latu, right before.
I'm sorry, Latu was right before, but Verse ends up winning Defensive Rookie of the Year, primarily with a lot of speed to power, right? And so I think if you have a guy like Williams still probably going to play roughly 50% of the snaps, maybe even more with having the flexibility of putting him inside on the interior defensive line on pass downs. You can move him all up and down the line. I think he's someone that's definitely going to develop the way that you want to, and has traits that you just can't really find. So
also think specifically, just speaking on the Georgia defense and schematically for them, that's just not a defense where you're going to see one player be a pass rushing, sack artist that gets 10 sacks, 12 sacks, and racks up a lot of pressures. They're a very disciplined rush team. They're disciplined in their rush lanes. They contain the quarterback and keep him in the pocket. They have a lot of 3-man rushes where they get a lot of coverage pressures and things like that. Like I said before, they run a lot of stunts and things like that. So a guy like Mykel Williams might not be in that outside rush lane when they do run those games. But I think Mykel Williams, I mean, you look at a guy like Jalen Carter, you look at a guy like Trevon Walker. These are not guys that racked up a lot of sacks at Georgia either. Nolan Smith is another name that comes to mind. So I wouldn't point to the box score with Mykel Williams, but I would look more so at what's the product that he's putting on the field? What specifically is he asked to do within his scheme, and how well is he executing that?
Astro is on my neck here in the chat saying Shea McClellin had 9.5 sacks his junior year and 7 his senior year. That was a horrible comparison to Shamar Stewart. I'm sorry, Astro. I know you're a big Shea McClellin fan. It didn't work out for the Chicago Bears, and I know how much you love him dearly, and it's okay. But I appreciate you tuning in and hit that like button. But you're right, when it comes to production, or you talk about the way Georgia stays disciplined in their lanes, can the same be said for the guys at Texas A&M? When you look at Nick Scorton and Shamar Stewart, everybody wants to say they didn't, Shamar didn't have the production, but obviously, you've got 2 pass rushers there. Not everybody's going to eat on every play.
Yeah, I mean, I think that can be said about Texas A&M to a degree. I don't think that their defense is as drastic as Georgia in that way, but I definitely do think that you saw the kind of fall off in production from Nick Scorton transferring from Purdue and going to Texas A&M. They do ask their edge rushers to contain the quarterback in the pocket, and that contain and setting the edge is their main priority. And then guys like Shamar Stewart and Nick Scorton, along with a guy like Mykel Williams, they were asked to 2-gap a lot in the run game. And so when you have such a big in the run game and you are responsible for 2 gaps, that does impact your pass rushing ability and kind of what the product is going to look like as a pass rusher.
Yep. And another thing that affects, the quarterback is obviously that 3 tech and that interior, that defensive line. Eric Beauchamp here in the chat is asking, 10 is too early, but Derek Harmon would fit in perfectly as a 3 tech. Do you agree?
I love Derek Harmon. Derek Harmon I have above Walter Nolan. I think if I was taking a 3 technique in this class and it wasn't Mason Graham, Derek Harmon's the guy that I'd point to. I've seen some mock drafts where Derek Harmon falls to the late 20s and the 30s. I think he could potentially be the steal of the draft if that was to happen, or at least the steal of the first 32 picks.
What makes, I know you say you love him, but what is the reason for that?
Yeah, he's explosive. He's twitchy. He can jump the snap. He can shoot gaps in the run game. He's powerful enough. I would like to see him finish some more plays because I think his numbers could have been even better if he did finish more plays. But he's a guy that can stay on the field for all 3 downs. You probably don't want him 2-gapping all the time, but I think as a 3 technique, as a guy next to somebody who is that 2-gapping nose tackle, I love Derek Harmon, and I think he's going to be a good pass rusher at the next level and pretty soon, pretty instantly.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to sell anyone here on like someone like Shamar Stewart or Michael Williams, but I think you mentioned it, Greg. People get scared off by the traits conversation, but as you can hear, Christian is providing some really good context in terms of why it's hard to not box score watch with these guys. Some of these college systems, they're asked to do things very specifically, and it puts them at a disadvantage sometimes to be able to go get sacks and things like that. So that's why someone will draft Shamar Stewart in the first round. Because these traits that these guys have, you can't find all the time in later rounds. So sometimes even when the production's not there, a scout, GMs, these guys are going to take chances on players like that because they feel that once they get them in their building and ask them to do what they do in their defense, that they'll be able to thrive. So again, not necessarily a pro Shamar Stewart take, but more so just want to provide that information. And when people are confused as to why would anyone do this, there's no production. That's why.
Yeah. I agree. I think that's a big part of every single evaluation, whether that's a quarterback, whether that's a wide receiver, whether that's an offensive lineman. What exactly is this guy being asked to do in his scheme? What are you going to ask of him at the NFL level? And are they seamless, or is that the same thing? Are they different things? How will he be able to make that transition if those things are different? That's part of the reason why the NFL is higher on Shamar Stewart than probably your average fan is, who might turn on a highlight tape, who might watch the box score. Just because they are getting that intel. They are talking to people in the building and asking, okay, what were his responsibilities in your defense? What was he being asked to do?
Yeah. Christian, and we've talked about this off air before, and Eric here put it in the chat regarding Scorton. At A&M, they've asked these guys to play much heavier, right?
Yep.
So I know you've mentioned to me in the past that, hey, I've noticed that this is probably why you see a little bit of a drop off in his game, because he's playing at a weight that he's typically not used to.
But isn't that where, is the whole narrative that Dennis Allen wants his edge guys playing at a higher weight, is that a false narrative, or does that hold water?
I think there's truth to that to a certain extent, at least in New Orleans. There's a ton of guys that you can point to that kind of make that true. But again, a guy who's able to go from 260 to 280, I think 280 is probably on that higher end. If they get him to split the difference, 270-ish, I think he'll be fine with that. So, and yeah. I guess, hey, we'll find out here in the next couple of months, right? We're at the end of April. These guys are starting camp soon. We'll see how big Austin Booker looks right coming up. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah. So let's keep moving this thing along. As we've got people in the chat here hanging out and following the mean streets of Twitter. I guess the Sears Tower just dropped his takes behind the scenes. It's always interesting when Sears Tower jumps into the Twitter fight. Never a dull moment on Bears Twitter. We did have one more question. I don't want to ignore it, from my guy Bearlissimo, asking, is Abdul Carter better than Chop Robinson last year?
Yeah, I would say yes. Abdul Carter is my number 2 overall player in the class. He's a guy who transitioned from off-ball linebacker to edge rusher, and in 1 year has already made himself a top 5 pick in the draft. He's still got some ways to go in fine-tuning his pass rush, but just off the explosiveness, just off of the cross chop, the swim move, things like that, his Euro step, just being able to go off of those 3 moves. He's a top 5 player in the class, undoubtedly. And I think even if he's in last year's class, we're not taking the first defensive player at 15. We're probably taking the first defensive player somewhere in the top 10.
Yeah. All right. Well, shout out to Bearlissimo, a.k.a. George. We appreciate you, my man. As we are starting to round third or head towards third here on Bears in the Stands. It's been a minute since we've done one of these shows. This used to be just a Bears channel, and then it's kind of turned into a Boilers basketball channel for the last 3 years. And I'm very proud, more than 3 years, probably 5-6 years now at this point. But I'm very proud of everything we've done with our Boilers coverage. But here we are trying to run things back here for our Chicago Bears coverage here on this channel. And so make sure you subscribe. hit the like button. We're going to continue to do these throughout the summer, keep building the chemistry. And then when we get to the season, have some fun. When we get to training camp, get some eyes on this stuff. And when the regular season hits, it's going to be a lot of fun for all of us as Bears fans. Let's hope. Jonathan Otten, I know, is coming out for the draft party here in a couple days. So I appreciate you, Jo. I can't wait to hang out with you, have a couple drinks. But we're going to be having some fun here the rest of this night. So once again, hit that like button while you hang out. Andrew Libby saying shout out to you guys. You guys are awesome. Know a lot of ball. Excited for Thursday. We appreciate that. And so we'll have to wait and see. But let's try something out for fun. And that is, of course, we're going to try out to share this screen here. Let me make sure I get this right. And see if we can get into a little bit of mock draft and make sure you guys are helping us out. Give your opinion on what we should do. Let me see if I can do this correctly because this is
you might want to restart it back up on.
All right, I'm going to restart it here. Make sure we get this right. Yeah, because we were doing it last night. We were doing a little test run. So we got the Bears pick. We got 7 rounds. We'll slow it down to fast because at turbo speed, that's just an insane speed. A little too fast for my caveman brain. So let's get into it as the picks come in. I don't know what just happened here. Yeah, we're going to start. We're going to start. Yeah, we're going to start the draft. See, that's what I mean. All right, so the first 9 picks are off the board. Cam Ward goes 1, Travis Hunter 2 to the Browns. Mason Graham goes 3. T-Mac goes 4 to the Patriots. Wide receiver going to the Patriots to help Drake May out. Abdul Carter falls all the way to 5 to the Jags. I'm sure they'd be happy with that. Ashton Jeanty off the board to the Raiders. Shadur Sanders to the Jets. Armand Membu to the Panthers, and then Tyler Warren, tight end, to the New Orleans Saints. So Will Campbell falls all the way to 10, and I know that would be a surprise to many. But let's see where you guys go with this, because you got Walter Nolan, Malachi Starks, Mike Green, Jahad Campbell, obviously, Will Johnson, Luther Burden, Colston Loveland. A lot of people have attached to the Bears. I don't know about that, but you just never know this day and age. So where do you guys want to go with this? I'll let you guys kind of run the show, and I'll just kind of click buttons, and you guys kind of monitor the chat and let me know what they're saying as well.
Joey, you go ahead, and I'll kind of read this chat for a little minute.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Will Campbell to probably no one surprised.
Send it. Will Campbell. You got to run to the podium at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have a clock, like if there would have been a clock that ran out here. All right, we're at the 39th pick. Malachi Starks made all the way to the 38th pick in the draft. Very interesting. Travion Henderson goes 36 to the Jags. Josh Connerly goes 34 to the Giants. James Pierce actually found his way into the first round. So that's interesting there. Shamar Stewart goes 27. Gray Zabel goes 26 to the Rams. So, all right. So now we're at 39. Some different guys here on the board. Some secondary guys: Benjamin Morrison, Kevin Winston Jr., Xavier Watts, a couple of Notre Dame guys. Obviously Omar Norman Lott, a little pass rushing, Landon Jackson. So I don't know where you want to take this, or if you want me to move around to different positions here.
Yeah, I would say filter, and Joey, you can add any if you want, but I would say filter defensive line, edge rusher, and running back.
All right. Defensive line edge, Landon Jackson, Braden Swinson. We got Princely, JT from Ohio State, Jared Ivey. So we got some, got some different options here. I'm not sure. We can move over to what, interior defense?
Yeah, you can. So actually, in the mock draft sim, you can highlight multiple positions at once. So it'll show you.
There we go. Yeah. I figured it out. It out.
Highlight running back as well, just to see who what we're looking at here.
Running back here. All right. Did I do it?
Yeah,
I
it's
did.
on. They're
Yep.
just further down.
A lot
Okay,
of running.
So
You got Cam Scattaboo here ranked 51st. It's not it's weird with him too. Some people got him ranked much lower, but he's the first running back here. Unless I'm not seeing this correctly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Trevor's got Cam as his 51st player and his third ranked running back.
Over
Scroll back to the
Quinshawn.
top. Yeah.
Yep.
So Landon Jackson is an option here. I don't think he provides the kind of pass rushing juice that you would really want here. Braden Swinson would be a great option for an odd front team. He's a top 50 player for me as well. I see him 47 here, but he's more of a 2-point stance, wide aligned, high side rusher. Like I said, on front in a 3-4. So I don't really love the scheme fit here. He's about 6'4", 250 pounds. I would say Princely here. I would want to go Princely, and he's a guy who, when he was at Florida, he played at around 270 pounds. He got to Ole Miss and dropped weight and got to about 245 pounds. So he is listed at a lower weight, but he is a guy who his weight can fluctuate and he can play at that higher weight. And I do have him above Landon Jackson on my board. So that would be my personal choice here at 39.
Joey, are you fighting this? Are we gonna have to go to a tiebreaker from the chat?
We might have to go to the chat, but not to take too much time on this, but this kind of scenario that we're in right now is exactly why I'm not super high on trading a second round pick to move up for Jeanty, because I could sit here and talk about, how an edge rusher would be a no brainer with guys like Dominique Robinson and Austin Booker as your backups. I can talk about, defensive tackle with, although they just got Jarrett, he's at the age he is, and Billings is at the age he is, and a pending free agent. And I can also talk about safety. You have two safeties that are about to be free agents, one with injury history, and a defensive coordinator who loves running 3 safety sub packages. So my goodness, there's too many options here. So
if we were talking safety, obviously I point to Xavier Watts here. If we're talking 3 technique, then Omar Norman Lott or TJ Sanders, those would be my guys. And then if you want more of your 2-gapper and your bigger defensive tackle who can play 1 technique, 0, things like that, I point to Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. So, and all of those guys, they're either top 50 guys or just outside of my top 50. I think you're getting great value on any of these guys here at 39.
Okay. But we're going with Princely. Is that where we're going?
You cool with that, Joey?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Going with Princely. We got 2 picks later, so it's kind of like
and so we didn't see any running backs go off the board there. So I think the biggest
corner, right?
I think the concern there is that maybe you see a run or an edge rusher go. If you go running back at 39, maybe they take an edge rusher at 40. But I think if you go edge rusher first in this scenario, maybe you keep yourself a little bit safe in that area.
Because you're saying running backs are getting pushed down. So
I do believe they are. Yeah. So I've got 9 running backs in my top 100 players. I've got another three running backs that are just outside my top 100. So I think, and obviously I don't think 12 running backs are going to go in the top 110, 120 picks. So I think there's going to be so much value on late day 2, but then also on day 3 here.
I don't know. I'm looking at, I mean, I'm a Notre Dame guy, but Xavier Watts is always around the football, and they have to have a future at the safety position. That's going to be that would be an interesting pick. I don't know if Bears fans would be running to the podium, because I think everybody's kind of in love with 3 positions: offensive line, defensive line, and running back. But the truth of the matter is, safety and linebackers still need to be positions that they look at going forward for the future. And certainly this is a win now team. So you wonder, how much can, different positions help you out. But, I would argue safety position is probably, while right now you've got a couple guys written in pencil, all due respect to Jaquan Brisker, but he just hasn't been able to finish a season. He really has trouble finishing games. So I look at that position, and I think that I mean, you've already got your edge. You've got your offensive linemen. You can make the argument with the running backs getting pushed down that safety would be one of the top priorities, if not the top priority.
Yeah,
And
I agree, and I think a conversation could also be had here for maybe corner over safety. Maybe corner is somewhere where they would go on day 2 before they would go safety, and maybe they go safety on day 3 or invest in the free agent market at safety. But I definitely think Kevin Winston Jr. here and Xavier Watts. You're getting 2 different players. Xavier Watts is more of your high safety, more of your rangy guy, and then Kevin Winston is more of your kind of box type of safety. But they both are pretty versatile. I don't want to put them like they're just a one-dimensional player, but yeah, I do think those are good picks here. I'm interested to see the running backs. I mean, I think Judkins should be on the board here.
Yep. Judkins is on the board 100%. Let me get over to it right now. And I don't want to hear it from Irv. Yes, I have trouble with this. Yes. There's Caleb Johnson. Keep scrolling down. There's Quinshon Judkins.
Okay. So me personally, I would go Quinshon Judkins with this pick. He's a top 40 player for me. I also would – I know corner is not a huge need on the team, but Savone Rebel Jr. out of East Carolina is a top 30 player for me. So if I were playing the value out and getting the best player on my own board, I would also give a pretty strong look to Savone Rebel Jr. But
well, let me ask you this, because we talk about safety position with Winston and Watts, but the Bears met with Andrew Makuba.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the difference between Makuba and those first 2 guys that we mentioned.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a drop off between Xavier Watts and Kevin Winston and Andrew Makuba. And I think depending on who you talk to, there are going to be a lot of people that actually have Andrew Makuba as their 3rd best safety in this class, ahead of Watts and ahead of Winston. Winston's a guy who missed a lot of time in this past year and was hurt. So his positioning on draft boards kind of fluctuates a little bit. Some people have him in their top 50. Some people don't have him in their top 75. So obviously Trevor here has him in the top 50, but it's not the most common placement along big boards to have Kevin Winston as high as Trevor does.
So I guess the question, Joey, go ahead, Joey.
Well, I was going to say, I kind of alluded to it a little bit about Dennis Allen and his 3 safety packages. But last year, the Saints had 4 safeties that played anywhere between 45 and 86% of the snaps. He has these guys, their 3rd, 4th corners on the field. I keep saying corners, 3rd and 4th safeties playing significant snaps. So, again, outside of the fact that you have a guy with an injury history and both of the starting safeties as pending free agents, I think I would not be surprised if they go invest another day 2 pick in a safety. So
I do like the value of safety probably at this next pick after this one, especially if Makuba is there, which I'm kind of expecting Makuba to go in the 3rd round. So me personally, I would wait on the safety position and I would go running back here. Or I would maybe go defensive tackle and just take one of the best players on the board, who's Omar Norman Lott.
Well, I mean, right. I mean, because that's the discussion. If we're going to, because we've really dialed into safety versus running back here, what's the bigger gamble on waiting until 72? Because there's probably more running backs than there are safeties, but maybe one of those safeties falls. So to me, it would almost be a better exercise here to take one of the safeties and then see what running back falls to the 3rd round. I don't think the Bears are going to be that impatient because of all the reasons I said about Ashton Jeanty. I think priority 1, as much as we're about, potentially taking 2 defensive players, here out of your first 3 picks. I think everything is about Caleb Williams here at the front half of this draft, but at the same time, it might be a fun exercise to see what running back actually falls to the 3rd round in the event we take a safety here.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I'm expecting Dylan Sampson to be there at 72. I'm expecting Damian Martinez out of Miami to be there at 72. Guys that I like a lot, DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. Martinez and Sampson are both top 75 guys for me. Actually, both top 65 guys for me in this class. I'm a lot higher on them than a lot of people. So, and I believe both of those guys can be guys that rush for 1,000 yards plus as early as their rookie season. So I am okay with waiting on running back here, but I'm interested what Joey's thinking.
No, I mean, that's a good point. I was going to say, and as I'm thinking it, I don't even know if I fully agree with myself, I suppose, but I was going to say at this point, you have guys like Judkins, Caleb Johnson that are left on the board. It's not that you won't be able to find good value in the third round, but I think that those two guys here are probably your last chance of getting, quote unquote, your bell cow or feature back. I do think there are a couple guys that you mentioned that might be able to do that, like Martinez or Giddens. But no, for the sake of the exercise, I think we could wait and see, what kind of running backs end up falling to the third.
Yeah, no, I mean, we'll go around more than once, but this time around, I'll say wait on running back. I will say I do agree with you on the bell cow thing. I think 41 might be your last chance to get that 3-down back. And I do think once you get past 41, now you're probably getting still extremely valuable backs, guys that are very good players, but they're probably more of they're in a split backfield kind of thing,
right,
where you're taking your early down runner like a Damian Martinez, or you're taking your pass catching guy. Maybe that's a Jaden Blue, who's your change of pace back, who's in there on third downs, things like that.
Okay. So which safety are you taking then out of the three? Kevin Winston.
I'm taking Xavier Watts personally.
All right. We're going to send it in, move things. And this is kind of a way. And also Tyler Booker was still on the
I saw, yeah.
That was interesting. And here it is. The 34th ranked player falls all the way to 72. Omar Norman Lott, defensive tackle. That is really interesting. And then here's some of the running backs. RJ Harvey. Here I'll
honestly, yeah, just go ahead and filter to the running backs.
Yeah. Well, my guy CJ West was still there at 72, but we've taken enough defensive guys. We gotta take a running back now. But I was getting trench drunk there for a minute. RJ Harvey, as you mentioned, Damian Martinez, DJ Giddens, Devin Neal, Jaden Blue, Brashard Smith, who the Bears did bring in on a 30 visit. Obviously, he's going to be bumped down the board here a little bit. But out of those top end guys, RJ Harvey, Damian Martinez, and DJ Giddens, if you want to throw in Devin Neal as well, which one of those four are you looking at?
Me personally, I'm going Damian Martinez. Damian Martinez is one of the better running backs in this class for me. I think after you go Jeanty, Hampton, Judkins, Henderson, Caleb Johnson, and Scatteraboo, those top 6 guys in that tier, my very next guy is Damian Martinez, my RB7. I think he's a guy that, like I said before, I think he can rush for 1,000+ yards as a rookie in the right situation that gives him the opportunity. And, with a good enough play caller and behind a solid enough offensive line. And then you also think about what the Bears need. They do have that guy who can come in on third downs like a DeAndre Swift. I think you get Damian Martinez, you plug him in instantly as your early down back. He gets, he's great on inside runner. And then he's also very scheme versatile, like I talked about earlier with some other guys. And in Ben Johnson's scheme, he's a guy who was in a zone-heavy scheme at Oregon State, transferred to Miami, and then, now they're running a lot of gap concepts in their RPO game and stuff like that. So I love Damian Martinez personally, but Joey, you can give your take as well.
I'm a Giddens guy, personally. I like the way that he sets up his blocks, especially on what I've at least noticed on runs when he has someone pulling out in front of him. He seems to be pretty patient. I like his lateral movement through the line. I think he's a good back. I think he's going to be very underrated. I actually just tweeted something out. I think it was last week about someone's going to be very happy on day 3 ending up with DJ Giddens. So I think he's another one of those backs that has that 1,000-yard potential. And so, yeah, I mean, if it's not Damian Martinez, I think I would go with Giddens.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We're like for me, it's kind of split in hairs. Like Damian Martinez is my RB7 and DJ Giddens is my RB8. So I'm pretty high on both of these players. I think the one thing I like a little bit more about Damian Martinez, I think his vision's a little bit better, and I also think he runs with more power. I think DJ Giddens being about 6'1", having that really high running style and that high cut body type, I don't think he runs with great pad level all the time, and I think he could be a better inside runner in tight quarters than kind of his frame would suggest. But I love both of them. Damian Martinez, I would just love to see him run over people in those gap concepts.
Okay. Damian Martinez is the pick because my guy, Steven Nicholas, that is his sleeper pick as well. He's been talking about it for a while. So the Bears also won't be picking for a while because they don't have a 4th-round pick as we enter day 3. And this is when we'll start to move things a little faster. Obviously, we want to try to really, exercise and see what we see, in terms of value picks in those first 3 rounds. But now that we start to get to the back end, we'll start to move things along to see if we can slide in another mock draft. We'll see, because we're getting a little bit up against the clock, but we appreciate everybody hanging out. Please hit that like button. Isaiah Bond still on the board, and that's somebody the Bears brought in for a top 30 visit. I know he had some accusations. I forget what it was that he got caught up in, but then did he get cleared of it? Not really clear.
Not really. Yeah, that's still kind of a big question mark. I would throw the filters on here, and I would go defensive tackle. I would go wide receiver. I would go tight end.
Not offensive tackle. Defensive tackle, you said?
Yep.
Okay.
Wide receiver, tight end.
Wide receiver and tight end. All right. You got Isaiah Bond, Ty Hamilton, interior defensive lineman from Ohio State, Mitchell Evans, tight end from Notre Dame, tight end U. Thank you very much. Konata Mumfield, wide receiver from Pittsburgh, Jalen Lane, another guy that the Bears have met with. You got Andrew Armstrong, wide receiver from Arkansas. Thomas Fedone, everybody's kind of favorite sleeper day 3 pick, tight end out of Nebraska. Where are you guys taking this, Joey? What do you think? It's a tough one.
Yeah,
we're getting in the weeds here.
I mean, the thing is at this point in time, I think the way I'm looking at it is more of just roster construction and the way that certain guys are going to be able to battle out in camp. So I mean, obviously, like if you're talking about just talent right now, it would be Isaiah Bond, but for the sake of us not going down that rabbit hole right now, and I'm assuming the Bears probably won't either, we would pass on that. But Greg, I know you've talked a lot about wanting to see a tight end get developed behind Cole Kmet. Most of these tight end 2s during his tenure as a Bear have been free agents, veterans coming in to kind of just fill that role. So I do like looking at that position here, as well as wide receiver. I was a big fan of the 2 additions we had this offseason, but both of those guys are on 1-year deals, and we're not really sure what is going on with Tyler Scott, or if there's anything that's going to be happening there at all. So tight end wide receiver would be a position I'd be interested in looking at in the 5th round.
All right. And I like, if we take off whatever's going on behind the scenes, you'd run to the podium for Isaiah Bond, right?
In the 5th round? Yeah, probably.
For me personally, I mean, obviously there's the off-field stuff that is all question marks to someone like me. I don't really know exactly what's going on behind the scenes there, but I actually did go on a stream last week, and one of the comments that popped up was sleeper wide receivers, who's your favorite guy? And I did mention Dante Thornton from Tennessee, who is on the board here. Just an absolute blazer. Take the top off. I think that's something that the Bears are missing in their wide receiver room, just a true 4-3 guy who's going to stretch the field and be that deep threat. So that's kind of my guy here that I would look at if it wasn't Isaiah Bond, which obviously, like I said, there are those question marks with Isaiah Bond that we don't really know the answers to.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, like I said, moving things along here, we'll take Dante Thornton out of Tennessee. Because we've had really good luck with wide receivers out of Tennessee in the later rounds. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Bayless Jones, Carm's guy. Carm's one of Carm's favorite players. So as we continue to roll through this, we have now arrived at pick 233. Bears are on the clock here in the 7th round with the 17th pick. So we're definitely getting in the weeds here. What positions do you want to look at, Christian?
So I want to go running back and tight end. I know, obviously, I've mentioned the idea of doubling up on running back. I think this, like I said, once you get out of round 2, I think there are very role-specific guys, and Damian Martinez is your early down guy. And depending on how you feel about a guy like DeAndre Swift and how long you might want him to be here, I do think there are some great pass-catching backs that will be available late on day 3. And then you're kind of looking at a backfield with 3 guys being Damian Martinez, DeAndre Swift, and that third guy that you take in the 7th round. And I think that in this running back class, because it's so deep, there will be someone in the 6th or in the 7th round that is capable of making an impact as a rookie, even in a spell type of role.
Okay. Well, here we go. We got Luke Lakey from tight end from Iowa, Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma.
In this situation, I'm going Jalen Conyers, tight end out of Texas Tech, personally.
All right, tight end Jalen Conyers. Here it is, tight end from Texas Tech, and then that arrives us here at pick 240, round 7, pick 24. What position are we looking at?
Did LaQuint Allen go off the board yet?
No, so that's actually great call out. LaQuint Allen's my guy. He catches the ball like a wide receiver. He's about 6'1" He's got good height, good size. Just a great pass catching back, and then he's also just excellent in pass pro. So I think getting a guy who he's got a big frame. He's also just natural soft hands, and then when you add on top of that the pass pro stuff, that's the kind of thing that gets a rookie running back on the field, especially a guy being a day 3 pick. And how many times have we pointed over the years that the Bears need to get better pass protection at the running back position? But this is also a guy who's capable of running the football, especially in outside zone and things like that. But I love his pass catching ability, and I love his pass pro.
All right. We're here getting to the final pick. LaQuint Allen, love the name, from Syracuse, from Shane's run of the town there. So final results, grading the draft. I don't know where it says the grade. I'm looking for it. Where would it say the grade?
I think it's at the bottom. There you go.
B+. We got a B+. Dante Thornton got a D. That's our lowest graded player. An A for Will Campbell, obviously an A for Xavier Watts, a B+ for LaQuint Allen. So that rounds out to a B+ here.
And I think one thing, especially as those grades go, obviously at the wide receiver position, guys with that much explosiveness and that much speed, they're going to get pushed up the board. So when you get to late day 2, when you get to day 3, a guy who might be a 180 to 200 level prospect might go a 150 just because he's the physical and the athletic profile that he's bringing to the table and all of that speed. How often do we see wide receivers get pushed up maybe to from late first round to early first round because they run that 4.30 or that 4.32? So Thornton's going to be a guy who, don't be surprised if he goes earlier than you're expecting on draft day, whether that's Friday or Saturday.
Okay. All right. So this is how we're going to do the second mock draft. It's got to be a little bit speedier because I got to roll here in the next 10 minutes. So this is how we're going to do it. Me and Joey are going to pick these picks, and then Christian, you will give us your feedback on said draft. So we're going to get things rolling right away. Cam Ward, T-Mac goes 2nd, Mason Graham 3rd, Abdul Carter falls to the Patriots. Will Campbell goes 5th this time. Travis Hunter with the 6th pick. Jalen Walker with the 8th pick, and Ashton Jeanty falls just short here of the Chicago Bears at 9, and now the Bears are on the clock at 10. Tyler Warren still on the board. Malachi Starks, Mike Green. So where you want to take this? Kelvin Banks still on the board as well. Kenneth Grant, my guy from Maryville, Indiana, the pride of the region. So Joey, where do you want to go with this?
I think we'll shake it up a little bit. We'll go with the skill position instead of the trenches here. Take the obvious, most talented one there, in my opinion, which is Tyler Warren.
Okay, Tyler Warren is the pick. The pick is in, although we could have looked at trades, but that's okay. We're rolling things along here. With the 39th pick, Josh Connerly still on the board. I think that's which way I'm going to go, Joey, with this. We got to get our tackle in the house.
Yeah, I mean, whatever player you like more here. I mean, obviously you only have to survive one slot between the 39 and 41 here. So
right.
if that's your number one guy on the board, then I'd go ahead and do that.
Right, because you got the Saints. They're not necessarily potentially looking for a tackle, but at the same time, so that I guess that's where you'd have to think a little bit about running back in case the Saints were to swoop one up between you. But we're going to go with Connerly anyway, in case there's a trade up. Tyler Booker goes to the Saints. And now what position you want to look at? Running back?
Yeah, we're going to switch this one up a little bit here. We're going to be very offensive friendly for this draft so far. So I'll go ahead and take a more, like you said, more of a workhorse type of running back. And I'm looking at what I see, Judkins as well as Caleb Johnson.
Yep. Judkins continues to fall to 41. All these running backs do, which is interesting, Christian. I mean, you know, people say Judkins and Travion Henderson and Omarion Hampton and Ashton Jeanty all going to go in the first round. And here these guys are. Quinshon Judkins, two drafts in a row where he falls to 41.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the expectation for me. I don't expect Travion Henderson to be there at 39 or 41, but I do expect Judkins to be there. I don't think Caleb Johnson's going to go probably in the top 50 picks. I would expect him to probably go late second, early third round. And then Cam Scatterboo is a guy that I like a lot. I think he's going to be a third round pick. So I know a lot of people think things are looking pretty bad if Jeanty doesn't go to the Bears at 10 because they want an upgrade at running back. But I think deep into the third round, you can still get a significant upgrade at the running back position.
All right. Well, who we want to take? We want to take Judkins. I'll let you make this call here, Joey.
We'll go with Judkins here.
Right.
I do like Caleb Johnson's game, but
I don't hate it. There. Omar Norman Lott continues to fall to 72, 2 drafts in a row. With the defensive tackle spot. Then you got Andrew Makuba, obviously, like I said earlier, and then you got CJ West. Man, I've fallen in love with this guy.
Collins.
What's that?
And Alfred Collins.
So who you want here? Because I could you can make an argument about any of those guys. Even my guy Xavier Restrepo. I love Xavier Restrepo.
You think it's time to throw a bone to the defense, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So which way you want to go, safety or defensive line?
I think we'll go defensive line. I feel like if you're here at 72 and Omar Norman Lott is still here, I feel like you've got to do that.
All right, there it is. We're going to get a better grade than Christian. I can promise you that right now. All right, we can double down on running back with Brashard Smith, who's kind of a hybrid, right? Christian, like, you know, he's able to do a lot of different things.
Yeah, so Brashard Smith, that was the guy that I watched pretty early on in the process, watched him around probably early to mid-January, and I knew nothing about him when I turned on the tape. I just, kind of had a list of guys to watch, and when I watched Brashard Smith, I was wondering why I hadn't really heard his name a lot. He's a converted wide receiver from Miami, played wide receiver at Miami, transferred to SMU this past year, made the transition to running back, and made the transition about as well as you could ask any player to do because he was a wide receiver at a very, very good program. Obviously, he does have the skills that are necessary to be that pass catching back. He can move out into the slot. He can run the full route tree because he's coming from that wide receiver background. And then he's one of the most explosive players in this class. Ran a 4.38 at the combine, I believe, or a 4.37 in the 40. And his initial, 10 to 15 yard explosiveness is just as impressive. So I'm a big fan of Brashard Smith. I'll be releasing a My Guys article of guys I'm above consensus on, and I'll be releasing that tomorrow. Brashard Smith is on that list.
All right. Do you think we should send this pick in here and double down on running back? I know you've said you want to double down on it, or is that too early?
I think taking Judkins gives you the flexibility that you don't have to do it, because Judkins isn't limited to just being an early down runner or just being a passing game kind of player. But I do think, like I said before, you don't know how long of a leash DeAndre Swift has with this organization. You don't know how long he's going to be here. And I think he would fill into that role seamlessly. And I think he could even give you more upside and more explosive plays than a DeAndre Swift does. So I think if you're thinking 2026 and beyond, I think Brashard Smith is a great pick, especially if you're going into that next offseason with Quinshon Judkins and Brashard Smith already on the roster.
All right, Joe. You got Pat Bryant on the board as well.
Yeah, I do like Pat Bryant, but I'm certainly not comparing Smith to Gibbs by any means, but I do just want to point out what Ben Johnson had said about Gibbs when they drafted him. They said they didn't look at him as they were drafting a running back, that they were drafting a weapon. And perhaps that's a reason that Brashard Smith has already been brought in for a visit, that's exactly how they look at him with his receiver background, his speed, all the different things he can do. So I would definitely like that move for them. They can find all sorts of way to get the ball in his hands.
Okay. I agree.
Well, let's have some fun. Brashard Smith, 2 running backs. DeAndre Swift, you're now on the clock as we move to the seventh round here. And now we're in the weeds. And so what position do you want to look at here as we wrap things up?
Maybe linebacker,
tight end,
linebacker. Well, I wouldn't worry about tight end after taking Warren at 10 overall. Me personally.
That's true. That's true. I forgot we took Tyler Warren.
But safety or linebacker with the final 2 picks, maybe.
All right. Let me take a look here. Bunch of guys. I'm gonna phone a friend, and our friend is Christian. Christian, save us. Who are we drafting?
Yeah, let's take a little scroll down just so I can get a better picture of just everybody who's on the board. Obviously, boards aren't always seamless, so there's a potential for one of these guys who's down here to maybe
Shiloh Sanders on the board.
On my board. All right, yeah, we can go back up to the top.
All right, no Shiloh, fine.
He said, "Yeah, we're too far down now."
Dean Clark, Jay Higgins, Hunter Wohler.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Hunter Wohler.
All right, Hunter Wohler from Wisconsin. Hogue would love that. And then our final position. Where are we looking here, guys? Taking a quarterback. You got some different quarterbacks here. Nobody of note.
I think you can also think about a dart throw at the cornerback position as well, or linebacker as well. And I think you talk about 7th round. When you think about that, a lot of these guys, if they're making the team, they're going to be special teamers. So a lot of these corners and a lot of these linebackers do bring special teams value if you're taking them late on day 3.
We feeling some Fentrell Cypress?
Personally, for me, take a little scroll down a little bit.
All right. That's it. That's the
okay.
only one.
I would lean Smith, or I would lean Jabbar Muhammad.
Jalen Smith it is. All right, there it is. Let's see what our grade is here. Drum roll, please. An A-. Even though Christian helped us here on the back end. So we didn't completely do it on our own, Joey, but we won. But my guy Cole Kmet's going to have to share the ball with Tyler Warren. So there it is. Josh Connerly, Quinshon Judkins, Omar Norman Lott, double down on running back. So we got 3 A's, a B+. So a really solid draft. So that wraps things up here for tonight. Wish I could go a little longer, but I got a meeting here that I got to get to. So it certainly was a lot of fun and a good exercise here in trying to figure out how this draft is going to fall. So appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll do more of these. We'll certainly check back in with you here when we get to the weekend and see what the Bears have done in this draft. So until then, enjoy the draft. Thank you for tuning in. Please hit that like button. Shout out once again here to Christian and Joey. Make sure you follow those guys on Twitter at the handles you see here below, and appreciate everyone's time. So once again, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you soon. And always bear down.